problem with that is you keep saying next year, full self-driving, and then have autonomy day, and then tell me you're going to be an Uber, basically, when I buy it, and my car will drop me off, go and earn money, and come back, and it'll pay itself back. You tell me that 5-6 years ago, and you're telling me that what he meant was, we're having a beta thing that's basically cruise control. Rubbish. Like, absolute rubbish.
Started during lockdown, needed something to do. They looked at each other, they said, hey, I like talking to you. And so from a garden shed in a box room in West London, they're discussing tech. It's the Small Time Bets podcast.
Anyway, usual stuff. Follow us on Twitter at small_time_bets. You can subscribe to our YouTube, join the Discord, or check out our merch store, of which I am wearing, and we have some stuff. Can you fill me in on market update for this week? Because it
Certainly
seems
can.
to be busy. There's been a lot of announcements from central banks, last I checked.
Yep, I'm not covering any of that. So this is the updates from the markets.
Isn't that
and
the whole
crypto.
important bit?
No,
No, okay.
not
My
interested.
mistake.
The markets are down between 1% and 3% this week, except the Nasdaq Tech Heavy is down 5%. So let's do a deep dive on tech, because we kind of tried to explain it last week, and I'm not sure we did a good job. And the story is beginning to fray. The story's coming apart at the seams. Let's look at who's down this week in order of increasingly getting worse. So Alphabet 9% down, Meta 8% down, Apple 10% down, Amazon 12% down. So Amazon, who are the bellwether for the consumer economy, really showing that things are definitely getting worse. I think the story gets a bit clearer and more consistent if you zoom out a month. So now, in order of getting progressively worse, month on month, Apple is only 5% down, then Alphabet 15% down, Amazon 25% down, and Meta 35% down.
Wow.
So if you look at that story, it's kind of consistent with Meta is having serious problems because of Facebook's ID for advertiser, plus increasing competition from TikTok. Alphabet is still nonetheless 15% down, despite the kind of the greater footprint that Alphabet has to defend itself from encroachments. And Amazon 25% down, a quarter down on the month.
Are they still a $1 trillion company? They're not anymore, right?
That's really bad news for consumer spending. Amazon's market cap is 928 billion.
I thought so. So they're no longer... So who's the biggest now? So actually, are Apple now the biggest company by market cap?
It will definitely be Apple.
Wow.
So meanwhile, in crypto, Bitcoin's up 3% to $21,000, mostly starting on Friday, where there was a rally. And Ethereum is up 6% to $1,650, and that's following a similar pattern where it went down throughout the week and then rallied throughout the course of today, Friday, at the end of the week. Other tokens, Binance BNB is up 18% this week, and Arweave is up 43% this week. Now, I suppose you want to talk about the Bank of England raising interest
Not
rates
particularly.
by 0.75%,
It's only like the highest raise in like my lifetime, but yeah.
or the equivalent Fed raise.
These are like the most boring topics until they're not. And the Bank of England one was so weird because it was the guidance was like, we see inflation falling very rapidly over the next sort of like 2 years, 3 years. Kind of like what I said last time, that inflation can drop just as quickly as it goes up. So they kind of said that. But then
It
they had
was
a huge
unusual
rate
guidance
hike.
because they
It was
said,
a very strange
we have
one.
to raise this really steeply, but just so everyone knows, we're expecting the top end to be lower than a lot of people are thinking.
I wonder how much of it had to do with like the politics of the UK and also the strength of the dollar more than it does actually inflation. In the Fed's case, it's kind of like rate hike. There's still high levels of employment. They'd rather have a recession than have high inflation. Okay, they're going to hike. With the Bank of England, it feels like they don't feel that inflation is out of their control. And actually what they're trying to do is just avoid a situation where the pound gets weaker and weaker and weaker against the dollar. It feels like that because otherwise you've got very weird guidance.
Well, so they both raised by 0.75%, both the Fed and the Bank of England, but they're dealing with really different economies.
They are. And last time,
And
remember...
whereas the Fed said that rate hikes are here to stay, the Bank of England said, we're doing this short, sharp shock, but don't worry, it won't go as bad as people are saying. So we're not expecting interest rates to have to cap out as high as 6. Expect them to max out at 4 or 5.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
Meanwhile, the government has an impossible task where, because of the absolute credibility blown by the previous government,
Wait, you said previous
they
government.
now have to...
It's the same government. It's been the same government for 12 years. It's just...
They now have to
people in
do
charge.
this invidious task of restoring credibility by being absolutely brutal and punishing, exactly at the point when the government should be the one entity actually pumping some spending into the economy.
So you mentioned a really interesting topic. You want to talk about whether you finally come round to my line of thinking, which is it's time to throw in the towel on full autonomy for driverless cars. Talk to me more.
There was a TechCrunch article on October 27th in TechCrunch by Daryl Hetherington. The title of the article was "It's Time to Admit Self-Driving Cars Aren't Going to Happen." And Daryl opens with the caveats that what he means is self-driving isn't going to be a thing in our lifetimes, and B, with any kind of omnipresent scale. So in terms of the daily lived experience of most people reading this, truly autonomous vehicles just aren't going to happen, says Daryl. Now, the thing is, if you're writing that clickbaity article, what you have to somehow explain away is the existence of Google's Waymo and Waymo Via, which is the trucking equivalent, and the Cruise vehicles from GM that are driving around the streets of San Francisco. And you somehow have to explain away, but less, the Tesla, so-called full self-driving. And the way that Daryl does it is by saying they do it in quite a limited area, right? So in the case of Google, it's, the suburban parts of Phoenix, Arizona, and then downtown Phoenix, and then San Francisco, within a certain number of blocks, but obviously growing. And then with the trucking one on certain interstates across the southern states of the mainland US. So it's limited to that, is I suppose what he'd say. And then also that the driving is quite cautious at times when taking junctions. Same probably argument he would apply to FSD, and that it's not level 5 autonomy, it's not level 4 autonomy, you have to keep supervising it. Those are the kind of things he'd probably say. So if you are prepared to give him all those caveats, like disregard it when it's working, like the Baidu ones in China, like disregard all the instances when self-driving is working, and then the claim is, if you ignore all of that, self-driving is never going to happen and you should give up on it because in your lifetime you're never going to see it. You're never going to experience it. It's just pointless and stupid. Now, I have a problem with that argument because it doesn't hold together. It just doesn't really hold together. I mean, there are literally driverless cars driving around autonomously, and they've scaled from one city, a suburban, easy-to-drive part of it, down to the downtown, to another city, probably one of the hardest driving cities there can be, in North America, San Francisco, and they will continue to scale, and they're testing it in Detroit. And I think, Waymo's probably the one to observe as the leading edge with the most miles driven and the best quality hardware and software fused into the Waymo driver. And they're driving trucking miles, and it's just going to keep expanding. I don't think there'll be a point where Alphabet says, well, we've spent enough money on this, let's call it a day. It was too hard a problem to solve. They've shown that they are solving it, and so are many others. Now, of course, Daryl will point to Argo.ai and Ford throwing in the towel on Wednesday of that week. But that's an example of Ford coming late to the game, trying to back a relatively weak player, and then deciding that they don't have the stomach for the long investment that's required. Google were in this business 15 years before Argo AI even got out of bed and decided that it was going to start doing autonomy. So it is a long game. It does require a long-term appetite for investment. So in the hype cycle, So there's the peak of inflated expectations, there's a trough of disillusionment, and then there's a slope of gradual kind of attainment of something that's a little bit better. And where we are in driverless cars is it's always darkest before the dawn period of driverless cars. We're in the period right now where we've got a working product out in the streets and literally anyone can see it. And the Waymo program's open to actual members of the actual public to come and use it. It's really perverse, but if you look at the Gartner hype cycle, you can kind of understand why. But it's really perverse at this exact point in the hype cycle, anyone should be printing clickbaity articles saying, it's over, give up on it, it's not coming. Because it's visibly here.
You make an interesting argument. So when, it must have been 7 years ago, kind of 2015, there was a guy called Salim Ismail. He was like one of the big execs at Singularity University. And I saw a talk from him. And he was like, full autonomy, 5 years' time by 2020. And he made a really good argument, Moore's law, exponential growth of things. Exactly your argument in terms of like, it'll get here much faster than you think because technology has these exponential growth cycles. And I was really bought in. And I remember being like, saying to my brother, saying to my dad, just like, I really thought that was inevitable. And I even made the prediction that my eldest nephew, who at the time was 2, he's now 9, I said, like, he won't need to learn to drive because by the time he's of driving age, like, we'll have autonomous vehicles everywhere and it will be the standard and you won't be allowed to drive manually. The Guardian did this really good montage video, the same clickbaity stuff that's going viral at the moment of everyone just kind of ridiculing self-driving cars. But it was great because it was just Elon Musk every year from 2014 onwards saying full autonomy next year. We'll definitely have full autonomy next year. By next year, full autonomy. Just literally year after year after year from 2014 until a month ago where he's like, we're going to have it very soon, full autonomy. And it's like, people still will just give him a pass on that. And there's a weird thing where...
To be fair, the thing that they're quoting him say is that full self-driving will be available by the end of the year. Or the full self-driving beta will be opened to the first 1,000 users, and we hope to expand it soon so that by Q4 we'll be expanding it to 10,000 users.
Have a look at it. He's not. Have a look at it. He's actually saying full self-drive. He even said, I remember because I had a pre-order for the Model 3, and he put a business model on the page that you could buy a Model 3 and it would self-drive and you could earn from it like Uber and it would pay itself back. He had that like literally 5 or 6 years ago, and I put a pre-order on that basis. But what's weird is he's saying full self-driving, which is the name of a software package that doesn't do full self-driving. Come to the defense. The problem with that is you keep saying next year, full self-driving, and then have autonomy day, and then tell me you're going to be an Uber basically when I buy it, and my car will drop me off, go and earn money, and come back, and it will pay itself back. You tell me that 5-6 years ago, and you're telling me that what he meant was, we're having a beta thing that's basically cruise control. Rubbish. Like, absolute rubbish. He set the wrong expectations time and time again, and I was bought in by it, but now I'm very much calling BS when it's BS. The interesting thing is my brother, who works in the automotive industry, he said, like, because people don't understand the levels of self-driving, you can say full self-driving and get away with it when really what you mean is level 2, partial automation, basically advanced cruise control, where you still have to be aware and hands on the wheel, which isn't at all what people think when they think self-driving. And he said full self-driving, i.e. level 5 autonomy, hands off the wheel, any condition, rain, snow, ice, traffic, whatever, decades away. And although you're saying they're rolling out these things and they are cars driving, they're in very controlled environments. And this is how I would characterize it, right? The problem with this, and the reason why I fell foul of this, I'm a big futurist, love to think that everything's possible in the near future and maybe get a bit over-optimistic. I think the problem is this: the success of full autonomy isn't based on the ability to drive on the road in ideal conditions. It's based on all the outliers and the rare, irregular, unpredictable situations which happen all the time in real life. That's why a lot of futurists get it wrong, because you're not looking for 99.99%. That's not what matters. It's the 0.01%, which is the most important, which leads to people dying. You hit a pedestrian, you crash into a bus, your Uber drives into and kills someone. Like, that's why Volvo and Uber pulled out of Arizona, where Google are doing the trial because they killed someone because of it and they got banned. So, Moore's law and all these exponential trends don't apply.
Terrible things. They did several terrible things. What Uber did was they turned off the automated collision detection and avoidance, the ADAS system that comes packaged in your Volvo. And the engineer that they had supposedly supervising the driving of the vehicle spent long periods of time, upwards of minutes, staring at the phone, possibly watching a video, instead of looking at the vehicle or looking at the surroundings. And when a pedestrian pushed a bicycle across the road from a verge, well, the thing is that the police video that Uber chose to release, they darkened it before releasing to the press.
Oh, to make it look even darker than it was.
Although there wasn't much lighting on that stretch of road, it was considerably lighter than it looks in the video that Uber released to the press, having submitted it to the police. So it's I don't think it's right to say that because of level 5 being impossible to attain, that's why Uber pulled out of driving in Phoenix. Uber was under really poor management, and they've done some things in the past of that company which are morally extremely problematic.
So yeah, separate
when they were called out on it. When they were called out on it, and when things went badly wrong, as they will do when you take your eye off the ball that badly, they had to, because they lost their license to operate. From a public sort of probity point of view, they couldn't any longer carry on doing that. Now, let's take a step back and unwind what some of the things you're saying. So you're saying that level 5 is difficult. Level 5 means it's basically no operational envelope.
No steering wheel.
So you can
just, it has to work.
And no operational envelope. You can drive anywhere. Like, you can take it to Iceland on the darkest day of the winter in a full blizzard, and you should be able to, even though you can't see where the road is anymore, the car should be able to get to the place what you tell it to go to.
No, that's not the right expectation, because you would, even as a human driver, pull over and probably not drive in unsafe conditions, right? Level 5 is when it just wouldn't drive in unsafe conditions in that case. But level 5 is like no steering wheel. You plot A to B and it goes.
Level 5 is meant to be everywhere there's a road in the world, it can drive.
But not. That's what it's meant to be. But not when it's actually dangerous to drive. I mean, it's like it can drive in all conditions. But the problem is it's meant
not to be like, you know how there's some areas of the world where until like 5 years ago, Google Maps didn't properly map it?
No, I know the argument you're going down here. You're going to go into this weird off-road
in level 5.
argument.
I'm not trying to make an argument
saying normal
against
roads.
What you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm trying to explain to you what you're saying. You're saying there is such a thing as level 5 autonomy. And the reason why self-driving is very far-fetched is because in level 5, you should be able to drive everywhere in the world where there's roads in an autonomous vehicle. My counter to that is as follows. Yeah, it probably is a long way away to have a car that can drive in every road on the world, on the surface of the planet.
I'm not making an argument.
I think that probably is quite a long way away. I think you can still have a remarkably powerful rollout and an incredibly transformative technology and like the impact of self-driving with what I call operational envelopes. So level 4, which means essentially there will be times when you're off the grid because the 5G connection isn't strong enough, or there's not high resolution mapping, or if we're in the Tesla world, which is vision only, although you're not dependent on high resolution maps, there might be some reason why maybe FSD isn't live in that market. Maybe it hasn't driven enough miles there yet. Maybe for insurance reasons. There will be some places and some reasons why you can't do your FSD there. But I can imagine that in our lifetimes, we will have self-driving, and we will have it not everywhere in the world, but in enough places and at enough times that it's really, really impactful. And what I mean by that, let me clarify what I mean. At the moment, the examples have been low-hanging fruit, right? They've been southern states where the worst things that happen to you is not really heavy rain or snow or ice, but like a dust storm that you have to anticipate, and mostly compliant law-abiding behaviour by other road users and by pedestrians, and fairly good road markings, and fairly consistent and predictable road behaviour. Now, the world is a very varied place, and there's a real spectrum. It's much harder to drive on the streets of Delhi where signage might not be consistent and road markings might not be there, and the behaviour of other road users might not be at all times 100% compliant with the road rules. However, there's a level 4 that's coming within our lifetimes, which doesn't just only work on sunny days in Arizona. There'll be level 4 that works in Detroit, and there'll be level 4 that works in Western Europe.
So just for clarification, level 4, high automation, means in some situations you can literally be falling asleep or playing on a game or something, but you have the ability to intervene and take over, right? That's level 4?
With sufficient notice.
With sufficient notice, yeah. So not just like, whereas level 3, conditional automation, you need to be able to intervene. You have to still be able to intervene. So Honda reckon they can do that. A couple manufacturers reckon they can do that. The thing is, and as I'm realising, just driving just a Kia at the moment, the ADAS stuff, basically advanced cruise control with lane deviation, steering around bends, adaptive cruise control to follow the car in front, brake, do all of that stuff at low speeds, high speeds, everything else, feels pretty nice and it's convenient. It's very close to level 2, but I would never say, oh, I've got a driverless car or self-driving car, even though actually for long journeys to and from Birmingham,
explain
from London
what level 2 is. Explain
partial automation. So like Tesla, so you have to have full attention. If your eyes aren't on the road, if your hands aren't on the steering wheel, it's going to buzz, bleep, disengage, right? So you can't just like text or fall asleep in the back. You have to be paying attention, and you're obliged to. It's part of the conditions of it that it will stop working if you're not. Those are still really practical and useful for long journeys. Never put my feet on the pedals. The car is more or less steering itself just with light intervention. If a car pulls in front, it's going to brake and then it will catch up again. Like, it's doing most of the effort.
So your Kia does lane keeping?
Mm-hmm. Not to the level of Tesla's, but it does follow bends.
Okay.
Yeah. So it won't do it at high speed, but it will stay in the lane, basically.
Can it do lane changes itself?
No. So it can't do overtake moves. That's more when people say 2.5, that's kind of what they mean. It's like that. Plus, if you indicate, it'll go and overtake and then pull in, which is a very programmatically simple move. I think the reason I agree with you, I think route specific, geofenced, level 3, maybe level 4 autonomy will be possible in our lifetime, but I actually don't see the business case for that in a lot of cases, right? And the reason for that is once you get down to that level on especially a lot of situations which are either highway end-to-end bits or urban situations, public transport's probably going to solve that better if more efficient, better forms of infrastructure for end-to-end transportation like trains or monorails or undergrounds or, these type of things are probably actually the equivalent of what you're describing. The value comes when you can say we don't need drivers because robots are essentially going to do it. And I'm just saying that the more you get into this, the more it becomes apparent that 0.01% of things that can go wrong, like animals running in the road or people pushing prams in it or a stray trolley rolls off or the weather conditions just simply, a tree falls down the road or something crazy, those things are really small in the likelihood of like your average driver, but magnified over millions of drivers, they're very common, and actually a system needs to be able to adapt to that and be better than a human in those situations. And actually what's happening at the moment is, although driverless cars are statistically way safer, the ones that we have at the moment, even when they're on level 2.5 automation, they're way safer than human drivers because they don't get drunk or fall asleep or any of those, which is great. But for the things that are unexpected and it can't handle or it misrecognizes because of the technology that it's using, they're really dangerous because they can go full speed into something that a normal driver would just not. You wouldn't plow in at 70 miles an hour into a stationary object because it misidentified it as part of the road, Like, those are the things that I think are going to be hurdles because there's a lot of random things that can happen with roadworks and bad drivers and poor parking and just so many things that I just think you're going to struggle. And even when you do get to a point, when you get to that level 5 high automation, literally driver can be asleep. If it has to obey the rules of what it's seeing, it's so open to sabotage. And that's, I think, the most, and I don't mean hacking, I mean, Just Quit Oil, or like an activist, a campaigner. I just literally stick a trolley in the road. The whole thing grinds to a halt because suddenly people don't drive around it or move it or do anything. They just get stuck because your car won't go past it because of safety. You'll hit these problems, which I think will make it a niche and not a mainstream thing, which I think was what that article said. And I think what people are starting to realize now, it will be a niche thing, but it will probably be it'll be less useful than just better public transport in a lot of cases.
I profoundly disagree. One of the reasons I disagree is because the value of people's time that you're giving back, and also, actually, there's so many reasons I disagree with so many of things you've said, and I could talk about it for many hours, but I'll just say it briefly. So, on edge cases, it's been interesting watching, as you've seen probably on Autonomy Day, the amount of fire hose of data that Tesla's accumulated to train its machine learning models. And a good example is, what about a bike that's on a car, on the back bike rack of a car? Or what about a car that's on another car? Or what about somebody who's carrying a bunch of stop signs? Like those are all edge cases that if you have enough data, you eventually encounter them with much more likelihood than a single individual driver is ever going to encounter them. What you have to solve for is to become less dangerous than the typical average driver. So if the average driver gets into one accident every X 10,000 miles, you have to, with autonomy, become less dangerous than that, and already you're saving lives.
I fully agree.
I
just don't think that's the bar,
and that
will be met.
That's a good outcome, and I think that's achievable through massive amounts of data ingestion. Sabotage is a serious issue. There's lots of stuff you can do to throw off LiDAR, and there's lots of stuff you can do that confuses the hell out of cars using either LiDAR or vision systems. And so if you have bad actors in the system, that is a problem, right? Similarly, if somebody stretches across the road a high tension wire for normal cars, or puts out something that will puncture people's tyres in front of normal cars, those cars may crash. It's difficult to know what to do about bad actors. That is an issue. And what else? Yeah, public transport. The funny thing is that people want to be in their own safe little bubble. And particularly when spaces become enormous, like continental Europe, parts of North America. And what you're doing with this is you're giving people back their time, and you're making it possible for people to have the distance and space that they crave, but also to see their loved ones. We're talking about end-to-end journeys, and public transport hasn't really worked across continental countries, partly because of lobbying efforts, but also partly because it's just not really, you don't have the population density to make it a satisfactory experience. So you're kind of saying, but if you have to sometimes pay attention, you might as well just take a train. That doesn't hang together for me. I guess in the end, the fact is we'll never know until it happens. And I'm sitting there in my driverless car going, Jonathan, I've just completed Mario Kart here. I've simulated driving for my own entertainment whilst driving to you. And I haven't had to touch the steering wheel once. One thing we haven't really spoken about yet that is it's a brute force attack that we have to think about whether it's going to work is, okay, so Waymo high definition maps, really high definition, centimetre accurate high definition maps of every operational space that it's going to drive in under multiple lighting conditions before they start giving over greater control and taking the chauffeur and driver, the assistant out of the vehicle, the engineer. Okay. Meanwhile, in the red corner, you've got Tesla. And what are they doing? Okay, so they've literally stripped out. Like, there were some people adding FLIR heat sensing cameras and other sensors that Tesla's decided it's removing the sensors, it's removing the LiDAR, it's going to just get rid of radar as well. Cameras only, because sensor fusion, it was all getting a bit confusing. Cameras only. What do we have? We've got two eyes. Cameras only. Let's go cameras only. And then an ingestion engine of the biggest fleet that anyone's ever seen, of tens of thousands of vehicles driving around with lots of cameras all looking at the roads, and also approximately geopositioning where they drive. And obviously you can tell from sensors in the tyres what kind of part of the road you are based on the road surface. You can more or less understand where the vehicle is. Now you've got vehicles that could conceivably run on rails, just using sensors, cameras, GPS, and just following where the car previously drove, like in Mario Kart Ghost mode. They could literally just drive. And that might get you to a place where it's kind of possible, like throw away your high definition 3D maps. You don't need them anymore. Where we're going, we do need roads, but we don't need LiDAR, we just need cameras. That's interesting because it's possible that they could do an end run around the really crunchy engineering problem that Waymo was solving for. It's possible that that might come in and blindside, kind of like, that is a brute force attack to the same problem. And for me, the jury's still out on whether that's going to do it. You've got really radically different approaches there. You've got, on the one hand, Waymo, extremely cautious, extremely engineering intensive, extremely difficult to do, processing intensive, to build a 3D model of the universe before you can start to drive it. On the other hand, playing fast and loose, but throwing large amounts of sensory data at the problem. Tesla's gone in and said, well, we'll do what humans do.
It's interesting. I think the jury's still out on that one. There's some logic to it. The Waymo cars, I think the LiDAR, omnidirectional LiDAR that they use to make the point cloud that's driving through, and the kit in that is like 80k, 100k before you even get to the price of the car, just the kit. Tesla found LiDAR and radar unnecessary expenses and have gone, we'll just put lots of cameras. And I think that's part of a cost-cutting
It's also the complexity of sensor fusion, right? So if your radar is telling you one thing, your LiDAR is telling you something else, and your camera's got some other view on what's happening, how do you make sense of that and decide which to prioritize and regard as a source of truth?
But I've often found, though, that if you think about what makes ADAS so great, it's because you're giving the human, with the two eyes and the ears and the mirrors and stuff, extra sensors that are largely LiDAR or radar, mostly radar, right? To get distance, to see through fog, to see through rain, to see things that actually vision can't do. Vision's great for identifying objects, mostly. It's not great for judging distance. It's definitely not good at seeing through fog or mist or rain or any of those things. So there are trade-offs in both of it, which is why the Google approach, which is the most safe and advanced ones, and in terms of, like we were saying, in terms of the miles driven, but it's also the most high-tech one. Tesla's brute force method, I think, it allows them to push ahead without an unsustainable cost point, because LiDAR is very expensive. Even as it gets cheaper, it's very expensive. And it allows them to avoid the sensor fusion problem. However, it's still not clear whether, like I was saying, the 0.01% of misidentified things will be acceptable to people, both regulators and the public, right? When it misidentifies something, and that either makes you do an emergency stop on the road randomly, or unfortunately causes fatalities, whether people are going to be just okay with that. Driver error, being tired, being drunk, people are kind of okay because it's the libertarian kind of, it's life is in your hands thing. Or if you're in a taxi, well, the taxi driver's liable. The AI algorithm misidentifying an object just because convolutional neural networks is a tricky one. And I'm not sure we'll get to like I said, we'll get to level 3, conditional automation, maybe get to level 4 in specific geofenced areas. I just don't know whether I'm just going to get in and it just drive me around based purely on vision. But 20, 30 years we may see. The bit that I was saying at the beginning of our conversation was my optimism of thinking this would all be literally everything driverless from 2020 has been, I've shifted. I felt like you 7 years ago. I've definitely felt more toned down, where I'm not in it's never going to happen. But I do think the journey there will be a much slower journey than people are ready for, and than a lot of the Tesla, Elon, futurist fanboys out there are going to be willing to admit, I think. But I don't fully disagree with you. It's probably different perspectives on immediacy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following the space for 15 years and I've studied it very, very closely for 5 years. And I started with the kind of giddy optimism that makes you want this to work because it's cool. And then I've kind of followed the Gartner hype cycle through. It's been amazing watching over the last 5 years the sheer despondency that's hit in with gradually more and more investors realizing that it doesn't appear to be coming through. As I say, it's really now perverse at this exact point in the trough of despair and now the increasing we're going up the slope of increasing usefulness. It's perverse at this point to throw one's hands up in the air and say, we're never going to make it, because there's real visible gains on the ground. Also, it's a really important problem to solve. And it's really important that this does get solved and we're making progress on it. And it's important because so many people die from road accidents. I think it's 40,000 a year in the US. And it's higher than in most countries because vehicles are bigger and because of legislation around road safety and who responsibility falls to. But if that happened in any other activity in life, it would be legislated away. People wouldn't be allowed to do that activity. So, this is a thing, the dangerousness of driving, inherent dangerousness of it, is destroying lives. And there's a technology solution that is working and that is gradually getting deployed to more and more places. At this point, it's quite weird to be saying that you're never going to see this work in our lifetimes. It's just weird because we're already seeing it working. And it will be a workable solution for a lot of places and a lot of weathers, and a lot of driving conditions, and a lot of driver behaviours, and a lot of pedestrian behaviours in a lot of parts of the world. And you'll see that in our lifetimes, and that will be an incredibly good thing. So keep the faith.
I agree, in our lifetimes, and it is a good thing. One final thought I'll leave you with is one thing where I do think we will see the full autonomy, and we even are seeing full autonomy, but where there's a super, super clear business case and you don't have the annoying, erroneous stuff that just randomly happens in the public domain, is where you've got controlled areas. So like mines, quarries, haulage on construction sites, those type of things where it's like heavy goods vehicles moving around those things. Those ones, you're already seeing that, and it's like so, for safety as well, it's really important. But I think they're a given that they're literally happening now, like now and for the next few years. I'm with you. Within our lifetime, we'll see this in more places. I just don't think it will be everywhere that people think it will be in like the very near future. I think it's going to be a journey of decades, and when it happens fully, it'll be like, oh, when did this suddenly happen? Everything's suddenly autonomous. But it's not going to be coming next year to you, full autonomy everywhere. I'm not going to be able to dispatch my Tesla out to go pick people up and then come back and pick me up from work anytime soon, I'm afraid. Cool. So I guess that's a wrap. Good pod.
Run out of time.
Literally. Gotta go. Can I get a refill? It would have been cool.
Okay, so now this is where I get to have the last word, and what I'm going to tell you is that full autonomy is not what Jonathan thinks it is. Level 4 autonomy is definitely coming. It's going to be transformative, and I get the last word. I've turned on my panel heater.
Is it good?
I'm turning it on now. This time.
It's not pointing like directly at you, so do you still get the warmth? How does it? Is it like a linear directional thing, or is it just like...
As I believe you explained to me as a living creature, I attract its heat.
That's not... It
just bends round corners through time and space. I think it bends space-time.
You're the gravitational well sucking in the...
Like a black hole. Like a black hole, I'm sucking in heat itself.
Nice. Well, stay warm. Stay warm there.
I think it might be time for this week's non-sponsor.
I have a great non-sponsor. So I'm going to put them on. I never buy sunglasses. And then at my wedding, I lost the pair that I'd had for like 11 years. And then I was like, oh, we're going to struggle. And then I picked up these. These make me look super cool. Well, maybe not. But anyway, these are from Sun God. They are one of those weird ones that actually started up through, I think it was through Kickstarter or something, but actually have now become a pretty established company. And they are a B Corporation. So they follow kind of the ethical and environmental social policies that make them compliant with the whole B Corp piece. They're a carbon neutral company. They do that weird thing that Patagonia do, which is free repairs if they break and a lifetime guarantee. So if they disintegrate or break or stop working, or if you just crush them, they'll replace them for free. And they're committed to sustainability. So these ones are actually their Infinite Frame range, which are 100% made from recycled waste plastic. And they're still very lightweight and durable. I found them recently, and I'm not big on brands when it comes to sunglasses. It confuses me that they're just all these fashion labels that I don't know just for sunglasses. Where these focus on like optical quality. You can choose the type of lens and whether it's polarized or not and customize it a little bit. And it's a direct to consumer. So it reminds me of like Allbirds or the ethical stance that Patagonia take. So I was quite interested by them. But that's Sun God sunglasses.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Jonathan, for this week's not a sponsor, Sun God sunglasses. So that particular one that you just put on.
Yes, the Renegade.
The Renegade. And how much was it?
It starts at £65, but depending on what lens you choose and whether you choose for the recycled plastic, and it can go anywhere up to 120. So they have a range of different lenses in terms of optical quality, but also whether it's polarized or not. But the website's very clear, it's very easy to use, and you can try them on, and they have lifetime guarantees if you break them.
Thank you very much. It's time for This Week in Crypto.
I want to ask you about one of your favourite topics, Meta. You're looking at me like, huh? You mentioned that Arweave was doing really well and went up like 50%, 60% or something. A lot of that was linked to this Meta announcement. And it's a string of things that I think are quite interesting from an NFT perspective, but also just from a Web3 perspective. Did you catch what that was?
Yeah, I think I caught the edge of it. So something like Instagram is going to use Arweave as the platform for storing data relating to NFTs. And as a result of this announcement, Arweave then went up, as we heard, 40% this week. What actually is the proposal? What's going to happen? Because I think Instagram's using Polygon, isn't it?
Yeah, they'll start with Polygon, then Flow, then Solana. And they're basically they're making it a marketplace.
So they're going to do all of them. Okay, right.
Well, not like mainnet Ethereum, but
right.
Probably because
which is a weird one to leave out. Yeah. Okay.
It's kind of weird.
And they've said that at least at first they're not going to charge gas fees. So that is a good reason to leave Ethereum out at first. Is Ethereum on the roadmap? Is it going to come in?
Don't know. I didn't see any noise about that. I know that OpenSea integration
where does Arweave?
Arweave comes in as the...
Where does Arweave come into the story?
The persistent data store. So for permanence of Instagram NFTs, they're using Arweave as that indefinite perpetual storage, which is it's quite timely. So last week we talked about the importance of decentralized storage and why that would be necessary, and for various reasons, whether it's censorship resistance or just having something outside of like the normal centralized web stack. It's interesting they're partnered with Arweave for that.
But surely it's up to each individual creators to say whether they use Arweave or not.
No, so
they could use
this is
like
it.
IPFS, or they could use.
So you're right. It is the NFTs that are natively on Instagram that will be doing that. And I think what they're basically saying is like, how you can mint stuff on OpenSea. You can you can, or on Super Rare or on Rarible. I think they're basically going to say like, we'll take a cut of that, a marketplace fee. That sounds like a good thing. Instagram, millions of users, all about sharing images, right? Images and short videos. So I think it's ideal platform for this. Good luck to them. I think it's going to be interesting to see how much of like the non-crypto mainstream are willing to get.
They might pull off a Reddit again.
Maybe. And Reddit was incredible, right? So, but that was very much like, weirdly, people love avatars. They love this idea of like, I'm this collectible avatar. Instagram's different. It's kind of, I was talking about, I'm writing that thread on like Web3 and NFTs. It's kind of that weird thing where it's like, are they going to do that thing where your stories and your whole timeline of content, you're the self-publishing person publishing them as NFTs and people can buy them or collect them? I don't know. I think that could be a very interesting move for Meta. And it's really good to see actually that they are not just faking it. They're going with, decentralized perpetual storage, and they're integrating with multiple blockchains. That's quite a positive stance, actually, I would say.
I was just trying to remind myself. So they could still have avatars in Instagram, couldn't they? Because Instagram has the circle, which has your profile in it.
Yeah, true.
So iOS still going to have the 30% fee problem, isn't it?
Oh my God, I have no
It's
idea how
I
that
don't
works.
understand how they're going to get around it.
So by the time you paid for your
it's going
thing,
to make everything really expensive.
but you won't have gas fees, but you'll have platform fees. So instead of paying for, basically, it's the funny thing will be, and this is like me just
So
being
they must
slightly
have
silly.
they must have bespoke. They must have like actual like exclusive NFTs that are Instagram collections. Otherwise, this can't work. Otherwise,
Yeah,
you have
no, they
to just
will.
go on the website.
No, they will. It'll like a marketplace, but it'll be
Remind me,
then
is there a
integrated
web
into
version of
OpenSea.
Instagram? Yes, there is. So people could get 30% off if they just leave Instagram the app and go into the website of Instagram.
Oh
on
my
Safari
God!
browser, right?
They must have done a deal with Apple. There's
But they,
no
but
way
they won't
people
be
are
able
doing
to
that.
message that they can because there's an iOS prohibition from Apple telling you that you aren't allowed to tell people that you can go to the website.
That's Apple. I'm
This is
certain
super confusing for me.
Apple will not do the 30% thing for this. Apple will be like, really, really sorry, Meta, saw you on hard times from our whole ad ID policy. You have this one for the 12 people who use Instagram NFTs. I feel like we've accidentally slipped into this week in NFTs. I don't know how that happened. Like, it was just a great segue.
This week in NFTs.
There's some really interesting stuff on the NFT project side. So you introduced me to Meebits, I think by telling me, Jonathan, trust me, you're going to start looking at these little blocky voxel-based people and you're going to start being like, oh, I want the one with the red hair. Oh, I want this. You're going to start picking up on these. And I thought you were mad. And it turns
Weird.
out...
Actually, that went the other way around completely. Completely went the other way around. So what happened was I thought that they were passing curiosity, but interesting because they're the same people who did CryptoPunks. Then you went really deep on them and got really like obsessively interested in them. So then I took a second look to try and understand what it might be that allows you to distinguish. And then I began to understand that actually, there might be something here. It's kind of interesting. So they were kind of ignored and unloved for a while. And then the original creators sold them and all the rights to Yuga Labs, the people behind Bored Ape Yacht Club. And so now Yuga Labs took stewardship of Meebits and gave the license to use the IP of the Meebits to the owners of the Meebits, which in other situations has led to a lot of creativity. Just to take one example, Snoop Dogg is opening up a dessert restaurant themed around one of his apes because he has the rights to the ape and he can make that ape a character and franchise the restaurant chain of dessert restaurants around it. Now, Meebits are blocky three-dimensional voxel-based characters, and now that Yuga Labs is in charge, they're really going to turn on the property. So they've released an app that allows your Meebit to dance around. They've also done the first of 8 sort of things, adventures, giveaways, like projects.
Oh, do you think that
the
it's
first
first
of the
of
8 is that, yeah, it's one of 8. And the first one is that if you, within the next 2 weeks, go to a website, I think if you go to turnon.meebits.app, then you can get a large poster sent to address of your choosing, and you have to pay for postage. But you can get a sort of a full print poster. They've almost like added more detail to the Meebits. I've noticed have you noticed extra flourishes on the artwork?
It's the rendering, right? So you had a lot of that happening with hobbyism in the community. And I think they've taken a lot of that because you get your 3D files, right? So you can go into Blender, you can start doing really cool materiality things. They've made it look like shiny Lego. So it kind of has a plastic gloss finish, but with really nice beveled edges.
Slight transparency at the edge.
And what used to be necklaces and earrings where they were kind of just yellow, they're actually gold. They have the feel. They've done some nice quality things with the rendering.
Have those become more detailed? And has the top part of the baseball cap become more detailed? Have they added detail?
No, I don't think they've added like detail in terms of reflections and materiality, not in terms of like extra things.
Just texture mapping, nothing else.
Just texture and the way that it reacts to light and everything. I think it looks great. I think it looks really good. And transparency. It's amazing what that does to people, because essentially you can also now go into the Meebits app, the regular one that was set up by Lava Labs, and they've added a new file that if you sign with your wallet and you own a Meebit, you can download basically the profile picture of that. They've given people a profile picture, is what they've done, of their existing thing that they had. But because it looks really nice and it's really well rendered and it's consistent, it goes viral as like the new look of it, like a reboot. And it's interesting they called this version 1.1. So when you do the turn on thing, it's like 1.1 on a roadmap to version 2.0, which is always nice because people love roadmaps and they love the hint of something else that's coming through. And you have until Friday the 17th of November to get the free print. So
I checked it out today and the website's not loading properly.
I think they're being overwhelmed by people, which is weird. I don't know why. There's not that many people. It did make me think directionally. I'm sensing this is a maturity curve for all NFT projects. So, you know, when like NFTs first came out, it was literally just any old random person doing like a 10K collection of an artwork and then disappearing, and you had a Discord and then that was it. Now it feels much more like, to be legit in this space, you actually need to invest a bit into it with all that money that you're getting from people selling and trading those NFTs. So Jadu have got the home portal where you can manage all of your stuff from their collection. Bored Ape Yacht Club have their own thing, which is their own space that you can go into and like hang out. And 10KTF, Wagmi-san, has the battleground stuff and the whole world they're building. It feels like the bar has been raised on what people expect from... You're paying an awful lot of money for these things, right? That are basically just blah, blah NFTs. They're having to now build the platform and the world, the app, the game, the kind of community for you to keep that value. So it does feel like the bar's been raised, and actually the era when any old person could just mint NFTs and get rich, which was happening last year, is no longer going to be acceptable. It's kind of what you expect with a maturity curve like this.
Yeah. It's become more obvious that it's not a collection of 10,000 images. It's the community building work, that sustained community building work that has to go on behind it. And you need to give people a reason to stay active and interested in the community, which doesn't mean just hanging new baubles in front of them regularly. It means having a vision for what that community is and releasing things and earning the commissions that you're getting on each transaction. Because unless that community is desirable, engaged, has a good vibe, and is the kind of community that other people would want in of, the prices are going to go down because the demand isn't there. So you have to commit not just to putting out the door 10,000 images. You have to commit to a multi-year effort of keeping a community together, curating it, policing it, and developing what that community can do and keeping them interested.
Now, do you? Because that brings us on to this next topic, which is art gobblers. So I agree with everything you just said, apart from Justin Roiland, who's famous for making Rick and Morty. If you've never seen it, I suggest you watch it. It's just great, just a fantastic sci-fi cartoon. He's now launched, in collaboration with a bunch of other artists and graphic designers, the Art Gobblers NFT project, which has been it's just been exploding today, and over the last week, in fact. And interesting enough, they took a different tack from what you said. They said the entire thing is finished as a product on day one, no roadmap. We give this over to the open source community to just run, and it's a fully self-sustaining ecosystem. So what's your hot take?
Art Gobblers. What I want you to do is explain what the hell this is.
Maybe you explain and you give me your take on it, and then I'll add my thoughts.
All right, here we go. So there's this thing, it's called a gobbler, and you feed it art, but you make the art using the really poor tool set on the website. And then if you laminate it, then you can display it by feeding it to a gobbler. The gobbler's like an art gallery, and the things that you feed it will be displayed inside its stomach. After a certain point, like some kind of Mega Gobbler, or what is it called?
Legendary Gobbler, I think.
A legendary gobbler will appear. There's only going to be 10 of them, and they cost 65 gobblers. So people will clearly band together. Essentially, think of it like the art market, and this would be like the Louvre version. Like, there's lots of galleries. Sure, you can go to gallery in Soho, but like this is in the Louvre. So when that mega gobbler, what's it called?
A legendary gobbler.
Yeah, exactly. When that Louvre gobbler comes and eats your art, it's like you've been recognised by all the people who had to come together in the collective to burn their gobblers to get the legendary gobbler to be a kind of a collective. Now, the funny thing about gobblers is that they produce goo out of a tube from their backs, and the more art you feed them, the more goo they produce. So for the first time, we have an in-game currency that is inherently disincentivizing you to treat it as a speculative asset. At a certain point, I got tired and I stopped reading. As far as we know, neither you or I are on the wait list, or are you?
No. They've all minted out. There's a lot of controversy about who actually got on this allow list because it seems to have been one of those stealth things of like gathering a community under a pseudonym for gobblers without people realising it's Justin Roiland. It's like this incredibly famous person. I mean, just a fantastic creator. And you can tell in the artwork it's very Rick and Morty inspired. And all the humour and the whole world about it is. Obviously, people were a bit gutted that it seemed like a select group of people got in on it. And the floor prices went up astronomically, I think to like 15 or 20 ETH at one point, which is, put it in like normal terms, it's like, what, $35,000 or something bonkers. It's dropped a lot now, but I mean, it was silly. However, it's got star power. It's a complete ecosystem. They seem to have built it with a kind of whatever the community wants to do with it is up to them now. So all of the contracts are open source, there's a GitHub that you can go to and kind of build on top of. So you said the tools are really crap. Some people have drawn some really incredible things with them, of the stuff that's being created from artists, and you can make better tools.
I've seen, but it's like trying to use paint to make Van Gogh. Right. Some people have done Starry Night.
Literally, they've managed to do some clever things. But I think the weird thing about it, here's my take on it. I think fair play to the team behind it. It's actually quite an impressive thing to launch, like a day one finished product with its own ecosystem. Like you said, a self-sustaining token economy that essentially inflates away, disincentivizing you from holding it like a speculative asset, but also incentivizing you to hold your gobbler, because if you don't sell it, it just produces more and more goo, and then you essentially have like relative parity in your... It's like a weird economic model that actually does make sense. And they've built this whole art gallery ecosystem, and it's quite innovative. But we'll wait and see whether it has the staying power.
So did I describe it correctly? So perfectly. If I own a gobbler,
yeah,
I am essentially the curator of a small art gallery.
Yeah.
And every
not
laminated piece of art I feed my gobbler, people should think of me as having curated that. Like I chose it, and what did I sacrifice every time? Did I have to buy the things I fed it?
No, so this is it. Your gobbler produces goo. This is going to sound nuts if you're just listening to this, but I suggest Googling it. You're going to produce goo. That goo can be used to create paper, and the paper can then be used to draw an artwork and feed it into your gobbler. And you can just choose to sell that paper to artists on OpenSea, so blanks essentially. You're seeing parallels with 10KTF in this, right? You basically get to create blanks. People then can buy the blanks, or you can mint something, i.e. draw artwork and put it into your gobbler, and it becomes part of your collection. In reality, like you said, there's a kind of weird paying attention, gamified investment part to this, where you need to be holding your gobbler. You need to be not selling it, because then you'll essentially create less goo. You need to be using that goo to make paper. You then need to be attracting artists and then curating your own collection. It's probably a very expensive and time-intensive thing to really keep up with. And you can use the goo to, I think it's like teleport a new gobbler in. So there's 2,000 at the moment. There'll be 10,000 in total. They have a kind of elliptic curve of when they're going to get deployed. So kind of like Bitcoin, fewer and fewer will come into existence over time. But essentially, you could end up with another gobbler, which is adding to your investment. It's a weird thing, but it's self-contained. My question about it is kind of following what your thread was about Meebits, is with no team behind it, you're relying on a sustained community keeping this going, because there is no roadmap, there's no further iterations. It is just left to the people. It's kind of interesting. That's kind of what Meebits was for a while.
Am I the patron of the artists who... Am I their sponsor?
Yeah.
The artists in my stomach.
But basically, so it'll say in the metadata, like, who the artist was, who created it, and which gobbler gobbled it. I need to look into it more and probably
It's
wait.
kind of a satire of the art market.
Oh, yeah.
Super interesting.
It's really... It is... Can it be performance art if it's just performing
So other
itself?
people... So the artists are going to be encouraged to produce more art that gets gobbled up by the more powerful and influential gobblers, right? So...
I guess so.
It almost changes the nature of the art that's produced by virtue of it's people vying for the attentions of the most influential gobblers.
Yeah, kind of. But remember Botto, where we saw a self-sustained ecosystem of generative art, a community in a DAO voting on the artwork, choosing it and evolving over time, and then it auctioning and then essentially buying up and burning the Botto tokens, making them more scarce, therefore self-sustaining. That kind of dried up a lot in terms of just lost favour with the people who were running it. So it's just, it loses momentum. And without a team and sort of fresh creative ideas going into it, it can go stale. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, it's great. Like, what a terrific experiment.
Yeah. And there is...
I hope it doesn't run out of energy. I like the fact that it has these seminal moments when a legendary appears, like 10 times in the lifetime of the project.
And it doubles each time, right?
wonder what
So
it
the
looks-
first time it's 65 gobblers. The next time it's 130 or something. It's prohibitively expensive. So you're going to need community action. So it kind of incentivizes that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
clever.
Yeah. And those people then become tastemakers. But tastemakers for what exactly? For the drawing of tiny, like very small bits of art on crude tools in a web interface.
Yeah, kind of is
Amazing.
missing something there.
Jonathan, are we recording next week?
No, we're not recording.
What about the week
next
after?
No, we're not recording then either.
What about the week after that?
No, we'll be taking a full month
Are
off.
we off for a month?
Yeah,
A whole month?
whole
Why
month.
is that?
a whole month at full pay. So
Is it is it because I'm away?
no, I'm away on my honeymoon. Don't worry, you'll still be paid for this time, as will I. the zero amount of money will trickle in. Yeah, I'm off on my honeymoon. I'm not going to record. I'm not taking equipment. You get a bit of peace and quiet, and we'll come back with a whole load of new things to cover. So yeah,
Exciting. Well, Jonathan, have a great time and thank you.
thanks. See you in a month.
See ya.
Started during lockdown, needed something to do. They looked at each other, they said, hey, I like talking to you. And so from a garden shed in a box room in West London, they're discussing tech. It's the Small Time Bets podcast. Doug is drinking a Brewdog IPA. Jonathan's got a Negroni. My daily line in the corporate world, at night they rock the party. Friends for nearly a decade. Good to have lockdown friends. And now we've reached the end of the Small Time Bets podcast.